Today's text comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verses 15 through 19. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." Then he said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter felt hurt because he had said to him a third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He had said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." This text is a very powerful text. This text is coming after Jesus had suffered through that craziness that was Holy Week. The arrest on Thursday, his death on Friday, and his resurrection on Sunday. Here is his post-resurrection as he's spending time with his disciples. We know the story of Peter. Peter, who was the staunchest supporter of Christ during the ministry. Peter, who was often called the Rock, often because he was hard-headed. Peter, who most times was at the forefront. He was there when Jesus went to the mountaintop and he saw Elijah and Moses. He was there when they came to get Jesus. He was always one of the few that was always with Jesus. And yet, on that faithful Thursday night, when they came and they arrested Jesus, he followed from a distance. And when he was pointed out as one of the followers of Jesus, he fought them off and said, "No, I'm not one of them." He cursed and said, "No, I'm not one of them." And a third time, he fought them and said, "I cannot be that man. I cannot be them. I am not the one you think I am." So here, Peter, who was at the forefront with Jesus, when Jesus was at his most vulnerable, he denied him and denied knowing him and denied being with him. Jesus, the one that he had called Messiah, because Peter was one of the first to say, "I believe you are the Messiah, the one, the anointed one, the Son of God, the person we are waiting for." Peter was the first to say, "I don't know him." And so now, after his resurrection, after the gathering or regathering of the disciples, after the trauma of that faithful weekend, we come to this point where Peter and Jesus are sitting together. And Jesus asks him a simple question: "Do you love me?" Do you think that's a simple question? If someone whom you had felt such affection for asked you, "Do you love me?" how do you respond? Knowing that you may have betrayed them or may have done something to hurt them or may have said something that you shouldn't have, is it easy to say, "Yes, I love you"? Here, Jesus asks him not only once, not even twice, but 3 times. It's often said that he asked him 3 times because he denied him 3 times. It's often said that 3 is one of the numerology numbers and a perfect number, so he had to ask it 3 times. But I think sometimes we need to ask a question more than once to get to the root and the heart of what the person really means. It is said that when lean principles, which is a manufacturing style, it is said that you must ask why 5 times in order to get a good answer. And I think that's quite often like a child asked, why? More than 5 times, probably countless times. But sometimes you can't just ask it once. You need to get to the heart of the matter, and Jesus is asking him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And each time he answers yes. And Jesus says, and feed my sheep. Provide food for my beloveds. Provide for those whom I have called. Be with them and feed them. Whether he's talking about literal feeding like Jesus did so often by feeding the multitudes, or providing them with spiritual food, or being with them to help grow crops, like he's saying to feed them as they need to be fed. Recognize their need. Recognize what's going on in their life. Recognize that this is bigger than you. It is about the children, the sheep, the lambs. Then after he asks a second time, and Simon Peter says, yes, I love you. He says to tend my sheep, to be their guide, to walk alongside them, to walk with them, to guide them through those dark valleys. Guide my children, care for them. Then after he asks him a third time, he was offended. He was hurt. How many of us have felt that before? When we're asked more than once about something, at some point it's just like, do you just not believe me anymore? Is it just that I'm not giving you the answer you want? And he responds in kind with, you know my heart. You know who I am. You know me even better than I know myself. Know that I love you. And Jesus says to him, feed my sheep. Care for my children. And at this point, it seems to me that there's more of a redemptive quality to this third time that Simon responds. Simon came to the realization that there was more than just an I'm sorry that was needed. There was more than just, I apologize for denying you. I'm sorry because when you needed me, I stayed behind and then lied about knowing you. This third time, there's a redemptive quality to his thought process and his feelings. He understood that what he had done was wrong. He had come to this moment. He had come to this time. He knew that even though he had already left it behind, he may have still been carrying the load of denying Jesus. And finally, after Jesus asked him this third time, he's able to be redeemed and take off the backpack of guilt, to take off the weight of the world that he was carrying on his shoulders, to take off that thing that was preventing him from moving forward. It was time to be redeemed and to move forward. It was time to leave what happened where it was and stop carrying it with him. It was time to accept that Jesus was forgiving him. He knows what he did. He knows that it was wrong. And now it was time to start moving forward. I think this is where we come in. Our moment, our redemptive moment, our moment to be redeemed. I think too often we feel like we've moved on, but yet we still carry the backpack of guilt. We still carry the backpack of all the things that may have happened. We carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, and yet we will deny even that and say, I'm doing great. I'm doing good. God has been good to me. But then we put that backpack right back on and carry that weight. I think very much like Peter did here with Jesus, it's time for us to be asked a few times, do you love me? Do you love God? Do you love the person you say you believe in? Do you believe and love this Jesus? Yes, I do, will be our first response. Well, definitely will be our second. But by the third time, we'd say, well, I think I really do. And if our truth is that we truly love and believe in God, and believe in this Jesus whom we come to church to worship every Sunday, then it's time to let go of the weight that is holding us down. It's time to take off the backpack of guilt and shame. It's time to let go of the things that prevent us from moving forward. It doesn't mean that you forget it. It means that you move on from it. For lessons that are forgotten are lessons that we repeat. So it's not about forgetting it. It's about not letting it be here in your present and moving forward in your future. It's time to let it go. Peter knows what he did. We know what Peter did. And Peter, his parallel story is Judas. Both of their stories of redemption are side by side because Judas couldn't handle what he did. He messed up and he knew it. And he took his own life. He didn't have that redemptive moment. Yet Peter denied Christ multiple times. And Peter held on and made it to that redemptive moment. Where are you on that parallel? Because even though we may not take our own life, we live a life that is not moving forward. We may live a life that is dead from all the things that we've held on to. We live a life often that we don't do anything. And then we complain about not doing anything. But what are you doing to let go of those things that are holding you down, that are holding you back, that are preventing you from moving forward? Do you want to be a Judas and live in the world of death where there is no redemption anymore? Or do you want to live in the world of Peter where, yeah, you messed up. Yeah, you did wrong. But there is redemption in Christ. More than just the words, more than just something that you come to every Sunday. It is a freedom that allows us to do the work of Christ, to do the work of God, to be the person and the people of God that we have been called to be truly the hands and the feet of Christ that we talked about earlier. We need to live in this freedom. If we are Judas, then we are dead. And we cannot be the hands and the feet of Christ because we're already dead. But if we are Peter, then we still have that opportunity. There is life in the redemption that Christ is offering. So in this day, I want you to consider, do you love Jesus? Jesus is asking you today, do you love me? And once you get past your initial yes, because that's what Sunday school taught us, Jesus is always the answer, and yes is always the response. Once we get past that, do you love Jesus? Do you love me? Jesus is asking. And your response will help you to define and to understand where you are. Whether you're living in a world of Judas and everything is just done and dead, there's no coming back from. Or are you living in the world of Peter where redemption is still possible and you are on the verge of being redeemed and receiving the freedom and being able to take off the weight of shame and guilt, but you need to let it go. Jesus, in this story, is helping Peter to let it go and telling him to care for those who are around you. How do you demonstrate that you have let it go? by caring for my lambs, by feeding my sheep, by tending my children and guiding them and helping them, by being the hands and the feet of Christ in this world. So the question is, are we willing to let it go? Are we willing to let go of shame and guilt and whatever else may be holding you back so that you can be truly the hands and the feet of Christ and care for those around you and those who are in need? So Jesus is asking you in this morning, do you love me?